My name is Jack Walker, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had the perfect life, a successful wife, a beautiful home, and 10 years of marriage I would have sworn were built on love. But all it took was one night, one glance across a crowded room, to uncover a secret that shattered everything. I wasn't just betrayed. I was humiliated in front of everyone we knew. And what I did next, well, let's just say it wasn't planned. If you think you know how you'd react to betrayal, think again. Because I thought I did too, until that night. They say life has a way of throwing the cruelest twists when you least expect them. When you're smiling, clinking glasses, and thinking you've got it all. That night at the Velvet Ember, I truly believed I did. It was the kind of restaurant that whispered wealth. Everything was polished to perfection. Mahogany floors gleamed under the glow of antique chandeliers, and a live jazz quartet played something smooth in the corner, each note melting into the air like warm butter. Waiters in black vests floated between tables carrying trays of lobster tails, filet mignon, and $200 bottles of wine like it was just another Wednesday. We were there to celebrate Claire's promotion. She had just been made senior director at her firm, a role she had clawed her way into over the last 5 years. The party was her idea, of course. A big, grand night to toast her success with friends, colleagues, and some upper executives. I went along with it, not because I craved attention, but because I was proud of her. Genuinely proud. She'd worked late nights, spent weekends glued to her laptop, and missed more date nights than I could count. But in my heart, I thought it was all for something better, for us. Claire was radiant that evening. She wore this sapphire blue gown that hugged her in all the right places, with a slit up the side that showed just enough leg to make heads turn. Her auburn hair was pinned up in soft curls, leaving a few wisps to frame her face, and her diamond earrings, the ones I bought her for our anniversary, sparkled each time she moved. People noticed her that night. Everyone did. We arrived around 7 p.m. The valet took our car, and as we entered the restaurant, a few of her co-workers were already waiting. I shook hands, smiled, played the good husband. Claire drifted from table to table like a starlet working a red carpet, laughing, touching arms, whispering in ears. She had this magnetic energy, and she knew how to use it. I remember thinking how lucky I was to be with someone like her. Someone beautiful, driven, respected. For a moment, I even wondered if I was enough, if I still measured up. But I brushed the thought away. We'd been through tough times. We had history. That had to count for something. The first hour went by in a blur of wine glasses and small talk. Claire clinked her glass and gave a little thank you speech. People clapped, laughed, toasted her with expensive champagne. She pulled me close and kissed my cheek, whispering, "This means so much more with you here." God, I believed her. I wandered to the bar around 8:30 p.m. to grab another drink. The bartender, a young guy with sleeve tattoos and a man bun, handed me a neat bourbon. I sipped it slow, watching Claire laugh with a group of suits across the room. I didn't recognize all of them, but one man stood out. Graham, her boss. Tall, salt and pepper hair, silver tie that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. He stood close, too close, but I chalked it up to business intimacy. That's how executives played the game, right? Claire caught my eye and waved. I smiled, lifted my glass, and turned away, trying not to read too much into it. Around 9 p.m., I excused myself from a conversation about real estate investment and stepped outside onto the balcony. I just needed a breath. The night air was crisp, and from where I stood, I could see the city stretching out like a blanket of stars. It was peaceful, removed from the buzz and noise inside. I closed my eyes for a moment and breathed in the calm. That's when I remembered. Claire had mentioned earlier she wanted to show me something special later that night. I figured it was some kind of surprise, maybe a gift, maybe a dance. My chest warmed at the thought. After everything, the late nights, the stress, the distance, I thought maybe this night was her way of reconnecting with me. I chuckled to myself, tossed back the last sip of bourbon, and stepped back inside. If I had stayed on that balcony just 10 more minutes, everything might have been different. But I didn't. And that decision, to re-enter that room, to go looking for Claire, was the moment everything began to fall apart. The air inside felt different when I returned. Louder, tense, the kind of energy that prickles the skin on the back of your neck. The music still played, and people still laughed, but something beneath it all had shifted. A vibration I couldn't quite explain. I scanned the room, looking for Claire. She wasn't by the bar. Not at the table where we'd been sitting. Not near the dance floor. Then I saw her. In the far corner of the restaurant, near the private wine racks, just barely lit by a flickering sconce, stood Claire. With Graham. My stomach dropped before my brain could catch up. They were standing close, closer than colleagues should be. His hand rested casually, but deliberately, on the small of her back. Claire leaned into him, her body language soft, familiar, intimate. Her head tilted back as he said something, and she laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from her in weeks. The sound that used to belong to me. For a second, I stood frozen. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I was tired, that maybe it looked worse than it was. But something in me already knew. This wasn't just work. Something inside that room had shifted, and I was about to find out why. I don't remember walking toward them, only the feeling. That slow, sinking weight in my chest like something inside me was unraveling, thread by thread. My vision narrowed. The clinking glasses, the music, the laughter, it all faded into a muffled haze. My eyes locked onto Claire and Graham as if the rest of the room didn't exist. I tried to stay calm, tried to believe there was some innocent explanation. Maybe they were just talking too close. Maybe it was loud, and she leaned in to hear him better. But as I approached, I saw things I couldn't explain away. Not anymore. Graham's hand lingered on Claire's lower back, his fingers moving in soft circles, like he was claiming territory. Claire's eyes sparkled, not with surprise or discomfort, but with warmth. Familiarity. Her hand, God help me, rested gently on his chest, fingertips grazing the fabric like she'd done it 100 times before. She wasn't pulling away. She wasn't resisting. She was participating. And then it happened. He leaned down and whispered something in her ear. Whatever it was, it made her smile, wide, slow, intimate. A smile I hadn't seen in months. Not since before the late nights at the office began. Not since she started pulling away, giving excuses, and treating me more like a roommate than a husband. That was the moment. The one where reality struck like a slap to the face. Claire wasn't just having a conversation. She was involved. Emotionally. Physically. And it was with him, her boss. The man she'd always insisted was strictly professional. The man she claimed was married to his work. The same man who once shook my hand at a company dinner and said, "You've got a hell of a wife, man." Now I understood what he really meant. A fire ignited in my chest. My fists clenched involuntarily at my sides. I felt this boiling heat beneath my skin, rage rising like floodwaters. My instincts screamed for confrontation, for answers. But above that, just barely, was the echo of heartbreak. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the betrayal of trust. The months of lies. The manipulation. The way she smiled at me earlier that night and kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't already giving herself to someone else. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. One part of me wanted to turn and leave. Another wanted to explode. But I knew I couldn't walk away. Not without saying something. Not without forcing the truth into the open. So I stepped closer. "Claire," I said, my voice flat but firm. She jumped as if yanked out of a dream. Her head snapped toward me, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Color drained from her face, replaced by a pale shade of panic. "Jack," she stammered, taking a step back. Graham straightened, the smugness not fully leaving his face. He looked me over like a man assessing a threat, deciding whether I was a nuisance or a problem. "Everything okay?" he asked, cool as ever. I ignored him. "Can we talk?" I said to Claire, locking eyes with her. She hesitated, glancing at Graham like she needed permission. That cut deeper than anything else. When she finally nodded, I motioned toward the hallway near the restrooms. Anywhere away from the staring eyes and the creeping whispers starting to build around us. But Graham, of course, couldn't leave well enough alone. "I think it's time we all stopped pretending," he said behind me, voice laced with condescension. "Maybe it's better if the truth comes out now." I turned slowly, my hands still shaking. "What truth would that be?" I asked, voice low. He smirked, stepping forward. "Claire deserves to be with someone who actually sees her. Supports her. You've been dragging her down for years." Before he could finish, I stepped in close, chest to chest. "You don't get to talk about my marriage," I hissed. Claire rushed between us, pressing her hands against my chest. "Stop, Jack. Please." Her voice trembled, but there was no denying the truth anymore. She wasn't angry at him. She was protecting him, defending him. Something inside me shattered. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The woman I had loved, sacrificed for, believed in, she was gone. Or maybe she'd never been who I thought she was in the first place. Around us, the room buzzed with rising murmurs. Heads turned. People whispered. The air grew heavy, thick with tension. Claire's eyes were glossy with tears. Whether they were from guilt or shame, I couldn't tell. But it didn't matter. The truth had already bled out into the open, and nothing would ever be the same again. The silence between us was louder than the jazz echoing off the marble walls. Claire stood a few feet away, her posture tight, hands clasped in front of her like a child caught red-handed. I could see her mind racing, searching for an explanation, a way to spin this into something less damning. But we were past that now. Graham lingered behind her, watching me like a man who'd just won a game and was waiting for me to accept defeat. His smirk, that smug arrogance, only added fuel to the fire already burning through me. I looked back at Claire, forcing myself to stay calm, though my hands itched to slam something, anything, into the ground. A table, a glass, his face. Talk, I said, my voice low but sharp. Start talking. She blinked. Jack, it's not what you think. I actually laughed. It came out hollow and bitter. Oh, please. That's the best you've got. I shook my head. I just watched you let him put his hands all over you in the middle of a crowded room. What exactly do you think I'm imagining? Her eyes welled up, but I had no sympathy left to give. Not tonight. Jack, I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. It started out as nothing. Just long hours, venting, leaning on each other. You leaned, I cut in, and then you fell into bed with him, right? Or are you still going to stand there and lie to my face? She flinched. That told me everything. It wasn't just emotional. It was physical. It had been for a while. The room around us seemed to close in, the noise now a distant hum. A few guests were staring, pretending not to. One woman actually had her phone out, clearly recording. Great. As if public humiliation wasn't enough, now I might end up as some viral meltdown on TikTok. I took a step closer. How long? Claire looked down. A few months. I nodded slowly. So, all those nights you came home late. The business trips? The exhausted smiles and sudden interest in going to the gym again. That was all part of this little affair. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. No defense. No denial. I turned to Graham. And you? Don't you have a wife and 2 kids? He shrugged like it was nothing. Separated. The marriage was dead years ago. Guess you decided to drag mine down with it. I snapped. He gave me a look, a smug, polished executive expression that I'm sure worked wonders in the boardroom. Look, Jack, you're obviously upset. But Claire and I, what we have, it's real. Maybe it's time you accepted that. My vision blurred for half a second, and something inside me broke loose. Real? He had the nerve to call it real? Claire was mine. We built a life together. We had 10 years, vacations, holidays, a damn mortgage. And now he stood there like this was just another business acquisition he could walk away with. Like I was nothing but a line item in the deal. I stepped forward so fast Claire had to physically block me. Jack, don't. Please. My fists were clenched so tight my knuckles ached. I could hear the blood rushing through my ears. One more word out of him, and I wasn't sure I'd be able to stop myself. You cheated, I said, my voice shaking. You both did. In the middle of your celebration. In our life. Graham raised a brow. Maybe if you'd paid more attention. That was it. I lunged. I didn't think. I just reacted. My hands were around his collar before I even knew I'd moved. He stumbled back, crashing into a nearby table. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. Claire was yelling my name, trying to pull me off, but I was too far gone. The months of suspicion, the late nights alone, the gut feeling I kept ignoring, it all exploded in that one moment. Graham shoved me hard, nearly knocking me off balance. But I was already swinging. My fist connected with his jaw, and he went down hard. Gasps filled the room. Chairs scraped. People backed away. Security rushed and seconds later, dragging me off him. My shirt was torn. My chest heaved with breathless rage. Graham sat on the ground, blood on his lip, looking more stunned than hurt. I turned to Claire. Her eyes were wide, her hand covering her mouth, trembling. Good. Let her tremble. The security guards started escorting me toward the door. One of them asked if I wanted the cops called. I didn't answer. As they led me out of the restaurant, I caught one last look at Claire. She wasn't chasing after me. She wasn't trying to explain. She just stood there, alone, ruined, exposed. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't the end of a night. It was the end of us. The night air hit me like a slap to the face, cold, sharp, and sobering. The heavy doors of the velvet ember slammed shut behind me, muting the chaos I had just left behind. My heart was still pounding, my fists still trembling from the impact. But it wasn't from adrenaline anymore. It was the aftermath, the silence, the hollow echo of everything that had just come crashing down around me. I stood there for a few seconds, alone on the sidewalk, trying to catch my breath. People passed by, throwing curious glances. Some whispered. I could see a few still peering out the restaurant windows, eyes wide with gossip. I must have looked like hell, shirt torn, knuckles red, suit wrinkled like I'd been chewed up and spit out. And maybe I had. I didn't care. What I cared about was the truth, that all of it, our marriage, our future, the woman I had given 10 years of my life to, was a lie. A beautiful, well-dressed, candlelit lie. I started walking. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to move. Needed to get away from that place. From her. From him. From the smell of perfume and betrayal still clinging to my clothes. Each step felt heavier than the last. I ended up in a park a few blocks away, quiet, empty, lit only by the dim orange glow of old street lamps. I found a bench under a crooked oak tree and collapsed onto it like all the strength had drained from my body. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the cracks in the pavement beneath my feet. What the hell just happened? 1 hour ago, I was toasting my wife's success. Smiling, laughing, proud. Now I was alone, bruised, humiliated, heartbroken. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't want to look, but I did. Claire. I stared at the name on the screen until it stopped ringing. No voicemail, no text, just silence. Then it buzzed again, and again. I let them go to voicemail. She could call all night if she wanted. I wasn't ready to hear her voice. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What would she even say? I'm sorry. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Please forgive me. The same cliches cheaters always spew when they get caught. Not because they regret it, but because they didn't expect to pay the price. I had given her everything. My loyalty, my trust, my years. I stood by her when she wanted to go back to school, when she switched careers, when she worked 70-hour weeks to climb the corporate ladder. I cooked dinners she never came home for. I celebrated birthdays alone. I convinced myself it was temporary, that she was building something for us. But it wasn't for us. It was for her. For them. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my wedding band. It felt cold in my palm, heavier than I remembered. I stared at it for a long time. The symbol of everything I thought we had. The promises. The vows. The dreams we used to talk about in bed at night, when we were still in love, when I thought we still had something worth fighting for. I wanted to throw it, hurl it into the bushes, into the street. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I tucked it back into my pocket, where it pressed against my chest like a scar I couldn't quite remove. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. I turned, expecting a jogger or maybe a cop on patrol, but no. It was her. Claire. She stood a few feet away, wrapped in a shawl, heels in her hand. Her mascara was smudged. Eyes red. She looked nothing like the confident, glowing woman who had ruled that party an hour ago. She looked broken. Jack, she said softly. I didn't respond. She took a cautious step closer. Please, just let me explain. Explain what? I said, not looking at her. That you've been sleeping with your boss for months? That you lied to my face every day and kissed me with the same mouth you whispered to him with? Tears streamed down her cheeks. I didn't mean to hurt you. I scoffed. But you did. Over and over again. She knelt down beside the bench, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away. I made a mistake, she whispered. No, I said coldly. You made choices. Over and over again. And each one took you further away from me. She cried harder, and for a moment, I felt something inside me twitch. Maybe it was pity, maybe just the ghost of what we used to be, but it vanished as fast as it came. I stood up, stepping back from her. Don't follow me. Her lip trembled. Jack, I don't know who you are anymore, I said, my voice low. But I know I don't want to be the man standing next to you while you pretend this never happened. And with that, I walked away. Not because I was strong, but because staying would have destroyed what little was left of me. The next morning, everything felt surreal, like the night before had been a fever dream, something my mind had conjured up from paranoia and exhaustion. But it wasn't. The sting in my knuckles, the tear in my shirt, the unread messages on my phone. They were all very real reminders that my life had just exploded, and the smoke hadn't even begun to settle. I hadn't gone home. Instead, I checked into a small roadside motel on the edge of the city, the kind of place where the paint on the walls was chipped and the silence inside the room felt heavier than anything I'd experienced in years. I didn't sleep much. I just lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, Claire's voice echoing in my head. I didn't mean to hurt you. Like that made it better. Like the absence of intent erased the presence of betrayal. By 6 a.m., I'd had enough. I showered, dressed in yesterday's wrinkled clothes, and drove. Nowhere in particular, just enough to keep the wheels turning under me. I needed time to think, to process, to figure out what the hell came next. When I finally stopped, it was in front of our house. Our house. The one we picked out together 3 years ago. I remembered how excited Claire had been about the open-concept kitchen, the backyard big enough for a dog we never got, and the fireplace we only used once, on our first Christmas in that home. It had felt like a promise then. A future. Now it just felt like a lie. I sat in the car, engine off, staring at the front door. The porch light was still on. The blinds were still half open like she always left them. A piece of me wanted to march up those steps, unlock the door, and reclaim my life. Another part, the smarter part, knew the moment I walked in there, I'd be stepping into a battlefield where nothing was sacred anymore. I didn't know how long I sat there. Maybe 20 minutes. Maybe an hour. Long enough for the anger to boil back up, then settle again into cold, hard clarity. Claire came out eventually. She didn't see me at first. She stood on the porch barefoot, wearing one of my old college sweatshirts, the one she always stole on lazy Sundays. Her hair was tied up. Her eyes were puffy, like she hadn't slept either. For a moment, she looked just like the woman I used to know, the one I fell in love with, the one I fought for. But I couldn't let that image deceive me again. She spotted my car and froze. I saw her hesitate, then slowly descend the steps, arms crossed like she was shielding herself from the wind, or maybe from the truth. I rolled down the window as she approached. "You came back," she said softly. "I didn't come inside," I replied. "That should tell you something." She nodded, biting her lip. "I didn't sleep. Neither did I. I keep thinking about what I did. About what I ruined." "You didn't ruin it, Claire. You destroyed it." That made her flinch. Good. Words should hurt when they carry the weight of truth. She came closer, resting her hands on the car door. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." I looked at her for a long moment. "Start by telling me how many people knew." She blinked. "What? The affair? Your coworkers? Your friends? Did they know? Did they laugh behind my back while I smiled at your office parties like a fool?" She looked down. "A few might have suspected." That was all I needed to hear. I nodded slowly. "So I was the last to know?" "Of course. Jack, I swear, I never meant for it to go that far. It just happened." "No," I snapped. "Things like this don't just happen. You don't fall onto someone else's bed by accident, Claire. You made choices. Repeatedly. And now you want what? Forgiveness? A clean slate?" She didn't answer. "I trusted you," I continued. "I defended you when people said you were too close to Graham. I told them they didn't understand you, that you were just passionate about your work. Turns out they understood you better than I did." Tears rolled down her cheeks again, but I was numb to them now. They no longer moved me. They felt like old tricks from a magician whose illusions I'd finally seen through. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "You don't," I said coldly. "Some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be left broken." She stepped back like I'd hit her, and for the briefest second, I felt the guilt claw at my chest, but I pushed it down. She'd made her bed. Now she could lie in it. Alone. I turned the key, started the engine, and looked at her one last time. "Don't call me again. If you want to talk, get a lawyer." And with that, I pulled away from the curb, not once looking back in the rearview mirror. Because I already knew what I was leaving behind. A house, a history, and a heart that would never beat the same again. I drove without direction for hours after leaving Claire standing barefoot on that porch. Our porch. Or maybe I should stop calling it ours. Every street light I passed, every green light I ignored, every mile I put between me and that house felt like one more piece of her peeling off my soul. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't outrun the weight of what she did. By midday, I found myself parked in front of my brother's house. Eric. He and I hadn't talked much over the last few years. Life got busy, and truthfully, Claire never really liked him. Said he was too cynical and always trying to dig up problems where there weren't any. Funny how the cynic turned out to be the most honest man in the room. He opened the door still in sweatpants, hair a mess, a mug of coffee in hand. One look at my face, and he stepped aside without a word. I hadn't even spoken yet. I walked inside like a ghost. My legs moved, but my mind was back at that restaurant. Back in the park. Back on the porch. I collapsed onto his couch, leaned forward, and let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Tell me you didn't kill someone," Eric finally said, setting his mug down on the table beside me. "Not for lack of trying," I muttered. He sat across from me, arms folded, eyes scanning me with that same no-bullshit look he'd had since we were kids. "Claire," I nodded. "How bad?" "She's been sleeping with her boss, Graham, for months." Eric let out a low whistle and leaned back in his chair. "Wow. I always thought that guy looked like a prick." I gave him a sideways glance. "You met him once." "Once was enough." I didn't laugh. Couldn't. But I appreciated the attempt. Eric let the silence settle for a moment before he spoke again. "You gonna stay here for a while?" "I don't know. I don't even know where home is anymore." He nodded, then disappeared into the spare bedroom. A few minutes later, he returned with a clean towel and a set of clothes. Old college stuff I'd left behind years ago. "Shower. Eat. Then figure it out." I took the towel, muttered a quiet, "Thanks," and headed to the bathroom. Under the stream of hot water, I finally allowed myself to cry. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was quiet. Still. The kind of crying that shakes your bones, not your lungs. Because it's not just about sadness, it's grief. Mourning something that's still breathing, but dead all the same. When I came out, the smell of grilled cheese and tomato soup filled the kitchen. Eric was no chef, but he knew what comfort food was. We ate in silence for a while, and for the first time in 24 hours, I felt human again. "Have you talked to a lawyer?" he asked between bites. "Not yet." "You should. Get your ducks in a row before she does." I nodded. I knew he was right. Claire was smart. Calculated. She wouldn't go down without a fight. And if this turned into a divorce, and God, it was heading there fast, I needed to protect myself. "I just keep thinking," I said, staring into my bowl. "How many moments were fake? How many times did she kiss me and think of him?" Eric didn't answer. Because there wasn't an answer that wouldn't hurt more. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the spare room, staring at the ceiling, every memory of Claire looping through my mind like a reel I couldn't stop. Her laugh on our honeymoon in Miami. The way she cried when we bought our house. Her voice when she said she wanted kids. One day, I thought about how I'd believed every word. The next morning, I did what I should have done long before. I called a lawyer. Her name was Melanie Grant. Divorce attorney. Sharp, direct, no nonsense. Eric had a buddy who used her during his own messy split. She picked up after 2 rings. "Mr. Walker," she said after I gave her the rundown. "You're not the first man to walk into my office with a broken heart. But I can promise you this. You'll walk out with your dignity intact and your future protected." I set the appointment for the next day. After I hung up, I stared at my phone, my finger hovering over Claire's name in my call history. Part of me wanted to yell, to demand answers, to make her feel a fraction of the pain she'd handed me. But I didn't call. She'd already said everything she needed to the night she chose him. Instead, I got up, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside. The sky was gray, rain in the air, but I didn't mind. The storm had already hit, and I had survived the first wave. Now it was time to prepare for war. I walked into Melanie Grant's office the next day with clenched fists and fire in my chest. It was a modern space, glass walls, polished floors, leather chairs. The kind of place built to make people feel small, unless you were the one paying the bill. Melanie wasn't what I expected. Mid-40s, sharp brown eyes, no makeup, tailored suit, and a presence that could silence a courtroom. She didn't ask me to sit. She told me. "Mr. Walker," she said as I lowered into the chair across from her, "you've been cheated on, publicly humiliated, emotionally gutted, but you are not going to fall apart. You're going to channel that pain into precision. And if you let me do my job, your wife will walk away with a lot less than she thinks she deserves." I nodded, trying to keep the emotion in my throat from showing. I was tired of feeling like the victim. I wanted to take back some control. Any control. "Let's talk assets," she said, flipping open a file. I laid it all out. The house, the shared savings, retirement accounts, even the joint business loan we'd co-signed 2 years ago when Claire was considering opening her own firm. She hadn't moved forward with it. Too busy with Graham, I guess, but the paperwork was still there, still tied to my name. She cheated, I said, eyes fixed on the legal pad. That has to count for something, right? In this state, Melanie replied, adultery won't get you everything, but it will open doors, especially if there's proof. I have witnesses, I said, a restaurant full of them, and I wouldn't be surprised if someone recorded it. Melanie smirked. Even better. Let's burn this house down. For the next hour, we went through every detail of my marriage. Dates, financial records, phone logs, habits, everything Claire probably thought I'd never piece together. But I had, because pain makes you alert in ways love never does. Before I left, Melanie gave me a checklist, documents to pull, accounts to lock down, passwords to change. Don't give her the chance to drain anything, she said. And don't confront her again. Let me handle her attorney. That word stung, attorney. Claire had said nothing since the last time I saw her. No texts, no calls, no pathetic pleas for forgiveness. She had gone radio silent, and I knew exactly why. She was preparing for war too. That night, I sat in Eric's living room with a bottle of bourbon and a stack of old photo albums I found in my car trunk. Wedding photos, trips to Lake Tahoe, our first Christmas tree, smiles that now felt plastic. I flipped through them like a stranger studying someone else's life, wondering how I'd been so blind for so long. Then, something snapped. I stood, grabbed the entire stack, and marched outside. Eric followed, barefoot and confused. What the hell are you doing? I dropped the albums into the metal fire pit on his back patio. Taking out the trash? I muttered. He didn't stop me, just handed me the lighter fluid. The flames roared to life, pages curling, memories warping in the heat. Claire's smiling face faded into ash. Her wedding vows, once written in gold ink, vanished into smoke. And as the fire consumed every fake moment we'd posed for, I felt something inside me begin to let go. Not peace. Not yet. But clarity. The next morning, it began. Melanie filed the paperwork. Claire was served at her office, an intentional move. Public. Embarrassing. Exactly what she had earned. The call came a few hours later. Claire. I let it ring twice before answering. Jack, she said, voice shaky. You really had me served at work? You really slept with your boss? I said calmly. So yes, consider it poetic justice. This isn't you. You're not vindictive. No, Claire. I wasn't. But I also wasn't the man whose wife lied to him for months and humiliated him in front of a room full of people. That guy's dead. You killed him. She went quiet. I don't want this to get ugly, she said finally. Then you shouldn't have made it ugly. She faltered. I still love you. The laugh that left my throat wasn't joyful. It was cold. Hollow. No, Claire. You loved what I gave you. Security. Devotion. A clean reputation while you played games behind closed doors. But love? Real love? That's built on truth. And you burned that to the ground. She sniffed, clearly crying now. I didn't expect you to turn on me like this. I closed my eyes. You turned on us. I'm just finally catching up. Then I hung up. No goodbye. No comfort. No pity. Just silence. Because when someone takes a sledgehammer to your heart, they don't get to cry about the dust. 3 weeks after the papers were served, the silence finally broke. This time, not from Claire, but from her attorney. Melanie called me one afternoon while I was helping Eric clean out his garage. I still hadn't gone back to the house. I wasn't sure I ever would. It felt like sacred ground turned graveyard, haunted by broken vows and whispered lies. She's agreed to settle, Melanie said flatly. I paused, leaning on the edge of a dusty workbench. That's fast. She's scared, she replied. The evidence is damning. The public nature of her affair, the witnesses, the timing, all of it puts her in a corner. She's trying to save face. I laughed bitterly. Too late for that. Melanie continued. She's willing to give up the house, her share of the retirement, and any future spousal support. But there's one condition. Here it comes. She wants you to agree to a no-fault clause in the settlement. No mention of infidelity? I asked. Correct. No blame, no formal accusation. Just two people growing apart. I nearly threw the wrench in my hand across the garage. Growing apart? I barked. Is that what they're calling betrayal now? I know how it sounds, she said calmly. But it's your choice. If you want to drag her through court, we'll win. You'll get more. But it'll be messy, public, and long. I ran a hand through my hair, anger tightening my throat. She wanted to rewrite the story, scrub it clean, erase her sins, and paint our failure as some mutual drift, as if I had anything to do with the hell she unleashed on our marriage. But at the same time, I was tired, bone-deep tired, of the sleepless nights, of the rage, of replaying every moment, wondering when the first lie was told. Maybe letting go wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the only way I'd ever be free. Fine, I said. Let her have her fantasy. The call ended. I sat down on a folding chair in Eric's garage, staring at the floor, numb. It's done? He asked, leaning in the doorway. Almost. That night, I returned to the house for the first time. Not to stay, just to close the chapter. The place felt cold, sterile, like it had been scrubbed of life. I moved from room to room, touching the walls, remembering echoes, her laughter in the kitchen, our fights in the hallway, the quiet Sunday mornings curled on the couch. They all felt distant now, like a dream someone else had. Her stuff was mostly gone. A few picture frames left behind on purpose, I was sure. The kind that begged me to look and remember. I didn't. I walked into the bedroom. Our bed was stripped bare, just a mattress and silence. That was fitting. That was truth. I found my wedding album in the closet. The same one I hadn't burned in Eric's fire pit because a small, sick part of me couldn't yet. I sat on the floor and flipped through it one last time. Her eyes sparkled in every photo. So did her lies. I closed the book, walked outside, and dropped it into the trash can by the curb. Goodbye. The next morning, I signed the final settlement papers. Melanie smiled with professional satisfaction, handed me a copy, and said, "You're free." But freedom didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, wind in your face, heart hollow. Over the next few weeks, I started piecing myself back together. Slowly, quietly. Therapy twice a week. Morning jogs to silence the noise in my head. I picked up freelance work and helped Eric with his renovations. I even took a weekend trip to the mountains alone, just to hear silence that wasn't filled with memories. And somewhere in that silence, I found myself again. Not the man Claire married. Not the man she betrayed. But the man who survived it. One afternoon, months later, I ran into an old friend at a bookstore downtown. Rachel, a woman I knew from college. We grabbed coffee, talked for hours, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the pull of the past anchoring me down. She didn't know the whole story. I didn't tell her. Not yet. Because I wasn't ready to let my past define every conversation. I wanted something new. Something real. As we walked out under the amber glow of a late fall sunset, Rachel smiled and said, "You look like someone who's been through hell." I chuckled, hands in my pockets. "I have. But," she added, "you also look like someone who made it out." I looked up at the sky, crisp and clean, and nodded. "Yeah," I said. "I did." And for the first time since that night at the Velvet Ember, I actually believed it. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the most painful endings are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves. Betrayal doesn't just break your heart, it opens your eyes. I learned that love, no matter how deep, cannot survive without honesty. That loyalty, given blindly, is not always returned. And that silence in a relationship can be far louder than any argument. To anyone listening, especially those who've lived long enough to carry both love and loss in their hearts, let me say this: never ignore the small signs. Never silence your instincts just to keep the peace. We are not too old to start again, not too late to walk away from what hurts, and certainly never too broken to rebuild. If you find yourself in the ashes of something you once held sacred, don't be afraid to let go. Don't let comfort trap you in misery. Life may weather us, wrinkle our skin, slow our steps, but it also sharpens our wisdom. Use it. Protect your peace. Demand your worth. Because no matter your age, your heart still deserves truth, respect, and the kind of love that never asks you to question your own value.